holds him to win by a matter of yards.
Hello and welcome again to another video. This time I'll be reviewing this Spark. Yeah, surprise, I buy Spark models too, I know, right? So Spark 1/18th resin model of the Lotus Climax 33 as driven by Scottish Formula 1 legend Jim Clark at the 1965 British Grand Prix. In this video I'll give you my honest views on the things that I like or the things that could be improved on this model car. But first, as always, here's a little backstory. If you're only here for the model car review, you can skip through to the next chapter by selecting it on the timeline below. When the Formula 1 circus arrived at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix back in 1965, Lotus driver Jim Clark was well on his way to winning his second world title. He had won 3 of the previous 4 races, with his title rival Graham Hill winning the Monaco Grand Prix in his BRM. Actually, Clark didn't compete in the Monaco Grand Prix as he was stateside participating in the Indianapolis 500 with his team Lotus instead. Oh, and he won that race too, of course, despite being a rookie. This meant he won every race he competed in that year up until then, both in F1 as in USAC or IndyCar if you will. The race at Silverstone proved to be quite an intense one. Clark had taken pole position by only 0.2 of a second from Hill's BRM. In the race though, Jimmy streaked away at the start and was leading comfortably by over 30 seconds from Hill. Clark's Lotus, however, started losing oil pressure and Jim had to find a way to drive around the problem. He cleverly killed the engine in the fast corners, losing only 2 seconds per lap in doing so. The pursuing BRM of Hill also suffered from mechanical issues, his brakes fading early in the race already. That didn't stop Graham from posting the fastest lap still, giving chase to Clark's wounded Lotus. In the end, Jimmy hung on to win from Hill by just 3 seconds. A couple of laps more and Hill surely would have found a way past the Scot. Clark also won the following 2 races and clinched the Drivers' Championship at the Nürburgring with 3 rounds to spare. That race in Britain perfectly summed up Jim Clark's Formula 1 career. He was utterly dominant in combination with the Lotus cars he drove in, which were the best of its era. The designer and founder of the team, the innovative genius Colin Chapman, built the fastest cars, but they were also prone to break down a lot. This sometimes led to very dangerous situations and severe crashes. Chapman was so obsessed with building the fastest car that he didn't take the driver's comfort or safety into account. The names of Clark and Chapman and Team Lotus are practically synonymous. If you think Jim Clark, you think Lotus and Chapman and the other way around. Both men also had a very close relationship, despite their differences regarding the build quality of the race cars. Clark won 25 races from the 73 he entered in Formula 1 and 2 World Championships. This could have been much more had he not been killed in a Formula 2 race at Hockenheim in 1968, aged only 32. He not only won in F1 and, as I mentioned before, also the Indianapolis 500, but also races and championships in Formula 2, the Tasman Series and even the British touring cars. As a person he was pretty shy and not at all interested in the fame and glamour of Formula 1 stardom. Jimmy was a simple shepherd from the Scottish borders with a true passion for his family's farming business. In a race car, however, he was a very different animal. He was devastatingly quick and is revered as one of the best of his generation. Now, I'm too young to have ever seen him race, but from the things I've seen or read about him, I truly think he was one of the best or even the very best Formula 1 has ever seen. He dominated the sport like only the greats can do. Just like Hamilton, Schumacher or even Fangio, he did have the best machinery at his disposal, but unlike the others that I mentioned, his cars were also the most fragile ones, which meant he suffered from a lot of retirements. This also kinda skews his statistics. To think he did all that in a time when even a small off could end your career or even your life makes it all the more impressive. To this day, Jim Clark is still the record holder of the Formula 1 Grand Slams. That means getting pole, win, fastest lap and leading every lap with 8. His nearest competitor is Hamilton with 6, despite having done almost 3 times as many races as Clark. This model was released by Spark some time ago already and has become increasingly hard to find. Spark did make a few other versions of the 1965 Team Lotus cars. They first released the German Grand Prix Lotus 33, the race in which Clark won the world title. This model came without the driver figurine. Later they released the Lotus 25 from that season's French Grand Prix, which is a different chassis to the Lotus 33. This model came with a driver's figurine then. So Spark then also released this British Grand Prix version then, which is the one I own. Rival brand GP Replicas now also released several versions of the Clark Lotus 33. They made a South African Grand Prix one, a British Grand Prix version, and then a German Grand Prix car too. These models do not come with a driver figurine. I do prefer this Spark version over the GP Replicas. First of all, the Spark is cheaper. There's also a driver figurine in it, and judging from the pictures I've seen of the GP Replicas, the Spark details match the GPRs, or in some cases, like here on the cockpit window for instance, I think they are far superior. The box of the model then is the same kind Spark still uses to this day. They will be changing their packaging style later on this year though. So on all sides there are pictures of the model from different angles with Spark's logo on it, the model designation then here, and a small cup telling it's a race winning car. On the bottom then is all the regular licensing info. And the box is in this typical Team Lotus British racing green with the yellow accents. Inside then the model is packaged in this styrofoam clamshell with these straps keeping it together. The model car itself then is set on the same kind of wooden base like all Spark 1/18 models. On the side next to the model then there is all of the model's info. So it reads Lotus 33 winner British Grand Prix 1965 Jim Clark. So the first impressions are quite good, I'd say. Although it's a model of a very simple car, you can tell it's quite detailed too. The model looks well proportioned, the addition of the driver figurine is nice, and the engine bay looks very good, and also the British racing green color looks to be just right. You can clearly tell from the get-go this is a premium quality model car. To the positives and negatives then, and I'm actually going to be very short about the cons, as there is not too much that I don't like about this model. The only negative point I found is the suspension arm that is bent a little. And this is probably only the case on my model, but it's pretty visible, well, to me at least. It's not very much of a real mistake, it's just that they assembled it too tightly, I think, which make this plastic rod bend out of shape a bit. If I'm really critical, I would say the face of the driver figurine is not really resembling Jim Clark's likeness. The figurine itself also does look a bit square-shaped when you look at it directly from the top. Also, if you look at the opening on the engine bay from the back, it's actually not a real hole, but enclosed and painted black, but you really would have to stare at it to notice it. I also don't think it looks that bad, but yeah, as I said, I struggled to find real flaws. So on to the positives then, and first of all I think the overall look is spot on. The figurine, although I don't like the face, looks to scale and is quite detailed too. I think the helmet is nicely shaped. The goggles don't look too bad either, even though there seems to be a bit of glue spillage on the visor. The driver's suit then is nicely replicated with all these creases and visible seams in it. And I think the hands are nicely modeled too. The details in the cockpit are not too bad either. The big red steering wheel looks nice with the Lotus logo in the middle. The similarly red colored dashboard has these simple visible dials too. On the right side of the driver under the hand you can spot the gear shift lever. And I also like the small red cable here on the side of the cockpit. The cockpit window then is in this very fine plastic which looks good. The rivet decals could have been a bit better I think, with photo etched ones for example, but it's not too bad either as it is. I do really like the small Desus fasteners for the engine cover. Speaking of the engine, the detailing on there is very nice. The engine is partly visible with this fine mesh roof over the velocity stacks. In between those trumpets there are a few yellow cables going over the engine block then. The rest of the engine is covered up, but on the bottom in between the long suspension arms, the exhaust piping is visible, leading to the two chrome pipes sticking out on the rear. I like these fine metal strengthening rods or cables that are attached to the gearbox casing then. The drive shafts are very thick and they are visible, connected to the gearbox. The rear suspension arms, the wheel hubs and dampers all look good. And I really like this fine brake cable attached to the visible calipers. The long rear suspension arms then connect to the monocoque in these nicely detailed pickup points. The small rivet detailing on the bodywork then looks good too. At the front of the model there's a mesh structure visible in the nose hole. The Lotus badge then is a real badge and not a flat decal. I do like these small vents on the side of the nose too. The front suspension is nicely detailed, I think. The upper arm consists of the steering arm and then a flat single piece with some rivet detailing on it. The lower arms are the more conventionally shaped wishbones, which is a structure still used to this day. The brake details then are again pretty good, with visible discs and calipers. And again here there's a fine brake cable attached to them. Finally the wheels then look pretty nice too. They are nicely shaped with the rears being slightly bigger than the fronts. The tread then looks realistic too. And the rims look nice in the chrome and black. These 3-spoked wing nuts look pretty cool too, I think. I also do like the Dunlop branding on the tires. To conclude, I have to say this is a pretty good model car by Spark. I thought since this was a simple car it would be a short and straightforward review. However, there are a lot of fine details to this model and they are almost all good. There are a few things that could be improved, but actually I don't think it's really necessary. I really wanted to add a Jim Clark model to my collection, as in my opinion he's a real GOAT of Formula 1, even though the statistics would prove otherwise, except for the Grand Slam one then. I personally think it's a must-have for every serious Formula 1 collector who is interested in the history of the sport. I mean, the iconic British racing green, the Team Lotus yellow and green livery, the best driver out there, and it's a fine detailed model car. It's a perfect combination. And with that, I would like to ask you, are you into these classic cars or do you prefer to collect the modern ones? What is your impression of this Lotus model from Spark? And do you agree with Clark being the real GOAT of Formula 1? Let me know in the comments below. Finally, I would like to thank you a lot for watching this review of the Spark 118th Lotus 33 of Jim Clark from the 1965 British Grand Prix. Leave a like if you did, subscribe to the channel and check out the other reviews as well. Take care, and I'll see you again in the next one.